My wife asked if she could just give the boss a kiss at the company party, laughing as if asking permission for a harmless joke, as if the mere act of saying it wasn't already a stab in the back. I smiled, but not with my lips, my eyes were frozen and my soul was cracked, and I replied with the only phrase I knew had enough weight to cut through the air and make it clear that this wasn't a game: if you do that, don't come home. She thought it was an exaggeration. She thought I was acting. But when I saw the kiss happen, right there, amidst laughter and glasses of white wine, with his hand in her hair and her eyes closed as if the whole world had disappeared, I didn't hesitate. I left. Without looking back. Without saying a word. Without giving her a chance to explain. That night, I left. I left behind not only the keys to our house. I left behind trust, respect, plans, the bed we chose together, the photos in the crooked frames in the living room, the Sunday routine, the smell of her morning coffee. I left behind the most innocent part of myself. It's strange to say, but it didn't hurt as much as I imagined. The pain didn't come like a blow, but like a silence. Like when you wake up and realize the constant noise of the fan has stopped, and only then do you understand that there was noise. The betrayal was that silence. She didn't scream, she didn't justify herself. She simply existed. And I didn't want to understand why. Because understanding wouldn't change anything. Because asking for explanations from someone who destroys you voluntarily is like apologizing for bleeding. So I packed my things. And I left. With a small suitcase, a crushed heart, and the certainty that I would never return. In the days that followed, she called. She texted. She cried on the other end of the line. She tried to meet me. But I disappeared from her world as quickly as she erased ours. Mutual friends came to say she was desperate, that she didn't know what to do, that she said she regretted it, that it was an impulse, a stupid thing to do. That there was nothing more than that kiss. That it was a provocation, a test. But I'm not anyone's experiment. And love that survives on tests is a dying love. And ours, at that party, received its death certificate. What hurt me most wasn't the kiss itself. It was the laughter before the kiss. It was the naturalness. The audacity of asking my permission. Like someone playing jump rope with dynamite. And when it exploded, she looked surprised. As if she didn't know what she had in her hands. For days I wondered what I had failed to offer. If I was lukewarm, if I had become predictable, if I had been absent without realizing it. But little by little, I understood that it wasn't about me. It was about her. About a void she tried to fill with cheap validation. And that's not something true love can heal. Because love isn't a band-aid for wounded self-esteem. While she cried at home, within the walls we built together, I silently rebuilt my peace. I started reading again. I started running again. I started looking people in the eye without thinking they would all hurt me. I relearned to like myself. I relearned to walk without fear of stumbling over memories. It wasn't easy. Sleeping was difficult. Eating was automatic. And for a while, I even avoided smiling because I thought it was disrespectful to the pain I felt. But it passed. As everything we face head-on passes. Life went on, even scratched. And one day, she found me again. It was months later, in a cafe we used to go to on Saturdays. She was pale, thin, her eyes heavy as if she carried sleepless nights on her shoulders. She sat down across from me without asking permission. She said she needed to talk. She said she thought about me every day. That she knew she had destroyed everything for nothing. That the boss, he disappeared. That it was just a game. That there was no future. That there was no meaning. That since that night she only existed in the past. And I listened. With the serenity of someone who no longer carries anyone's weight. I simply said, I forgave you. She smiled, thinking that was an opening. But I continued, I forgave you to move on in peace. Not to go back. She understood. At that table, with 2 untouched cups between us, she understood that the love she threw away would never return. She cried. She didn't beg me anymore. She just lowered her head and left. That was the last time I saw her. Or at least that's what I thought. Months later, while walking through a park that had become my refuge, among the fallen leaves of a late autumn, I saw her again. Sitting on a bench, alone, her gaze lost on the ground. When my eyes met hers, it was like a dull punch. She opened her mouth, but said nothing. Perhaps because there was nothing more to say. Perhaps because the pain had already said everything. And then a child ran to me, blonde hair, a carefree laugh, a small storm of life, and jumped into my lap. Right behind her walked a woman with soft hands and a sweet gaze. My girlfriend. My peace. The ex-wife, no. The woman who betrayed me, watched that scene like someone watching the end of a movie they never understood. Her eyes shone. But not with love. With loss. That kind of loss that can't be recovered. And there, in that moment, without a word exchanged, without shouts, without drama, she knew. She knew she had lost not only the man who loved her, but the man she should have respected. The man who was now smiling again, but for another reason. For another woman. For another life. Perhaps what destroys someone most isn't regret itself, but the certainty that forgiveness came too late. Too late for new beginnings. Too late to fix what was crushed. Love, when broken like that, doesn't return to its original form. And what remains is the emptiness of someone who had everything in their hands, and chose to let it all fall away. But did she truly understand the weight of her choice? Or was she still hoping for another chance, even after everything? Because what happened next, nobody saw it coming. Not even me. And that's where the Real story begins. Welcome to the channel. Here, we neither romanticize nor justify infidelity. All stories are fictional, but they carry a painful truth. Betrayal destroys, corrodes, and leaves scars that even time cannot erase. Our purpose is clear, to show, through fiction, the high price to pay for throwing away true love. Get ready. What you're about to hear is shocking, realistic, and impossible to forget. Good story. They met on a warm autumn Saturday, one of those days when the wind carries dry leaves and new promises. He, with the serene eyes of someone who has learned to listen before speaking, was walking through the downtown bookstore when she bumped into his shoulder, searching for a rare edition of a classic novel. The first contact was brief, almost shy, but there, in that awkward exchange of smiles, a silent curiosity was born that would grow day by day. His name was Ethan, calm, observant, with a gentle manner that made time seem to slow down around him. Her name was Emily, intense, decisive, with a lively laugh and a way of speaking that always seemed to hide a story behind the words. Both were emerging from difficult phases, poorly healed wounds from previous relationships, and yet, they found space to believe that perhaps this time would be different. Their first encounters were filled with small discoveries, a shared favorite movie without knowing it, a song they both listened to silently before bed, a similar way of looking at the world with a certain restrained wonder. He admired how Emily seemed to see everything with such intensity, as if she felt the world in an amplified way, as if everything about her was emotion, even when she tried to hide it. And she was enchanted by the tranquility Ethan brought, as if he were the only fixed point amidst the chaos of her inner anxieties. He wasn't the type to seek applause. He simply was. And that, for her, was new. Emily had always had to fight for space, for attention, for love. With Ethan, everything seemed simple. And for the first time in years, she felt she could simply be. Their relationship grew slowly. Between Sunday coffees, long nights talking about everything and nothing, hands intertwined in silence while watching the rain fall outside the living room window. They built a routine not made of obligations, but of choices. Waking up next to him was what she wanted. Coming home and finding her reading on the sofa was what he expected. There were no grand theatrical gestures, no empty promises. There was presence. One day at a time. And that, in today's world, was already a miracle. They bought a small apartment together after 2 years. Nothing luxurious. But with large windows, plenty of light, and walls that seemed to have been made to hold laughter. Ethan insisted on preparing dinner on Fridays, and Emily, despite her questionable taste in wine, always brought a new bottle to try. They argued occasionally, like any couple. Over small things, a wet towel on the bed, the way she always forgot to turn off the kitchen light, his way of avoiding confrontation. But even in their arguments, there was respect. When the anger passed, came the apologies, the tight hugs, the feeling that there was a safe place there. It was love. Real, imperfect, everyday. And perhaps that's why it was so strong. Emily worked at an advertising agency, and in recent months she had been challenged with a new role. She was good at what she did, creative, dedicated, but sometimes it seemed like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Ethan noticed the weariness in her eyes and did his best to ease her burdens. He took care of the house, made coffee before she left little notes with words of encouragement. He understood that love also meant support behind the scenes, not just in the main scenes. She thanked him with glances, with quick kisses before rushing out, and with that phrase she never failed to say, "I don't know what I would do without you." And he smiled, without imagining that one day that phrase would carry such weight. Over time, the two began to dream about the future. They talked about trips they would take, about perhaps adopting a dog, about what it would be like to have children in a few years. They had a habit of walking in the same park on Sundays, where they always stopped to watch the ducks in the lake and dream big about what was to come. Friends said they were the ideal couple, and outwardly, they did seem to be. But inside, something small began to change, subtly. Emily started working too many hours. She brought reports home, becoming emotionally absent even when physically present. Ethan noticed, of course, but thought it was just a phase. Maybe it was the weight of the new job, the stress of daily life. It never crossed his mind that their love could be at risk. He believed that when two people choose each other every day, that was enough. That love was like a garden, it required care, but it also knew how to bloom on its own. Emily, for her part, felt a different kind of weariness. Not physical, but existential. She questioned whether it was enough, whether she had lost a part of herself along the way. Sometimes she looked at Ethan and wondered if she was living everything she could. It wasn't about him. It was about her. About a restlessness she couldn't explain, a silent dissatisfaction that began to grow without her realizing it. And when she did realize it, she was already in conflict with feelings she didn't understand. She had everything to be happy. And yet, she felt an emptiness. Despite all this, there was love. There was care. There were memories being built, and moments of tenderness that filled the silences. Like when, on any given late afternoon, Emily arrived home with swollen eyes and Ethan didn't ask questions, he simply hugged her until she fell asleep on his chest. Or when he stayed up all night while she battled a persistent fever. They were gestures. Silences. Presences. The kind of love that doesn't shout, but sustains. And perhaps that's why it was all the more painful when everything began to slip through their fingers. The changes were small at first. Emily started spending more time at work, responding to his messages with less enthusiasm during the day. The conversations became more practical, less intimate. Ethan tried to reverse this, suggesting activities they used to do together, but the "I can't" and "I'm exhausted" started piling up. He didn't force it. He just waited. He trusted it was a phase. That love, on its own, would pull them back to the center. But love, when not nurtured from both sides, tires of waiting alone. Even so, nothing was alarming. The house remained organized, the Friday dinners continued, albeit more quietly. She still laughed at his jokes, though less frequently. He still looked at her with that old affection, though with more caution. It was as if the two were dancing a waltz whose steps no longer coincided, but they still tried to keep in time. And that's when the pain sets in, when you feel you're losing someone who's still there, sitting across from you, having coffee in the same place as always, but with a distant look. When you realize that love is dying not for lack of feeling, but for lack of presence. And Ethan felt that. A little more each day. Their 4-year anniversary was approaching, and he was planning a surprise trip. He wanted to rekindle something, create new memories, remind her of what they had built together. He prepared everything in secret, paying attention to detail, as he always did. Meanwhile, Emily seemed increasingly involved with the world outside their home. She spent more time on her phone, more time in meetings, more time away. But she still came back. She still slept next to him. She still said, "Good night, love," before turning off the light. And that, for Ethan, was proof that there was hope. That love was still there, waiting for a gesture to blossom again. He didn't know. But something was coming. Something that would change everything. Something that would throw carefully laid plans to the wind, and shatter the deepest certainties in seconds. He still believed in love. And that, perhaps, was his greatest strength, and his greatest weakness. The party took place on a Friday. One of those Fridays when the air feels lighter, as if the whole world is getting ready to relax. It was the end-of-quarter celebration at the company where Emily worked, a big event with people from various departments, live music, waiters circulating with trays full of drinks, and laughter everywhere. She had mentioned the party a few days before, as if just mentioning something trivial, and Ethan, even noticing a slightly higher than usual enthusiasm, didn't question it. Emily was radiant that night, wearing a tight burgundy dress that accentuated her curves, and sporting the red lipstick she rarely wore. When she came out of the room, ready, he looked at her silently for a few seconds before saying she looked beautiful. She smiled, gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, and said she wouldn't be long. Early in the evening, Ethan tried to distract himself, watching part of a documentary, reading a few pages of a book, but his mind kept returning to her. Around 10 o'clock, he texted her asking if everything was all right. She replied quickly, "Yes, everything's great. I'll tell you later how it went, love." The reply came with a heart emoji, as always, but there was something, plastic. Cold. He felt it, but ignored it. He chose to trust, as he always did. Trust was the foundation of everything. And with Emily, he never thought he would need to doubt. She arrived home around 1 in the morning. Barefoot, holding her heels in her hand, makeup smudged at the corners of her eyes, with a sleepy smile and a sweet perfume. She said she was exhausted and that the party had been longer than she imagined. Ethan offered to make her tea, but she refused. She just wanted to sleep. He watched as she walked to her room, closing the door slowly. This should have been just another ordinary night. But it wasn't. The next morning, while she was still sleeping, something gnawed at him from the inside. A nameless restlessness. A discomfort that grew like a whisper turning into a scream. He decided not to confront her, not yet. But something inside him had already understood. On Sunday, she suggested a walk in the park. It was the first spontaneous gesture of affection in weeks, and it caught him off guard. They walked among the trees, ate ice cream, and sat by the lake. Emily was lighter, more talkative, as if she had shed a weight behind her. Ethan listened, but couldn't detach himself from what he felt. When they got home, he went to the kitchen while she took off her shoes. On the counter, he saw her cell phone. A notification popped up, a message from someone saved as D. Harper, with only a fragment visible. "It was just a kiss, but I've been thinking about you since Friday." Time froze. The impact was dry. It wasn't anger rising, but a devastating silence. Ethan picked up his phone, stared at the message, and for a moment thought he could simply ignore it. Go back. Pretend. But he knew something had broken. He went to the bedroom, where she was folding a shirt, and held out his phone to her. She looked, paralyzed. Her eyes widened, and a look of guilt came before her words. She tried to explain, but no sentence came coherently. It was nothing, it was an impulse. I drank too much, I don't know why. Ethan simply said, his voice calm, hard, and leaving no room for doubt, if you do that, don't come home. The sentence echoed in the silence of the room like a verdict. She cried. She said she didn't want to lose what they had, that it was a mistake, that it meant nothing. But he no longer listened with his heart. Only with his eyes. He saw in her something he no longer recognized. Something that seemed distant, like an old photograph. He packed his things in silence. He took only the essentials. When he crossed the threshold, she was sitting on the hallway floor, her face buried in her hands. They didn't say goodbye. There was no hug. Only the sound of the doorknob and the certainty that something that had taken years to build had ended there. In the following days, Emily tried to contact him. She sent long audio messages full of regret and memories. She asked to talk, to be heard. But he needed space. Silence was now his form of healing. Absence, his only protection. Time passed. She insisted less. He slowly came back to himself. Until one day, without warning, the two met in the park where everything used to make sense. She was sitting on the same bench where they always stopped. Ethan almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were sunken, her posture was hunched. When she saw him, she immediately stood up and ran to him. She said she needed to talk, that there was something she needed to tell him. He hesitated, but felt that perhaps listening was the final step to closing that cycle. They sat in silence for a few seconds, until she began. She said that the boss, yes, the one she kissed at the party, had disappeared from the company days later. She said she tried to find him, confused, perhaps wanting to understand if he felt anything, if there was the slightest chance of redemption. But what she discovered completely destroyed her. She wasn't the only one. She wasn't special. He had done it before. With other women. With other men's wives. It was a pattern. A game. And at that party, there was a bet. 3 colleagues from the department bet that he could get a kiss from the most unattainable woman on the team. And she was chosen. Not because she was beautiful. But because she was married. Because of the challenge. She recounted everything, her voice choked with emotion, looking at her own hands as if shame could be washed away with tears. She said she only found out because, days later, an intern who liked him overheard the conversation in a closed group chat and recorded it. When she heard it, everything inside her shattered. She realized she had destroyed her home, her love, her life, for the whim of another man. That she had traded everything for an inflated ego, for a moment that never had any value. And while she spoke, Ethan just watched in silence. He didn't cry. He didn't tremble. He just listened. She said she spent nights wanting to disappear. That she didn't sleep, that she didn't eat. That she lost the meaning of almost everything. That she remembered every detail of their home, and that the emptiness she felt wasn't just guilt, but grief. Grief for having killed something that could have been forever. She asked for forgiveness. Not once, but many times. And then, with swollen eyes, he asked if there was any chance. Any. Even a small one. A glimmer of light. Ethan took a deep breath and looked around. The park was full of children, couples, people living in their own little worlds. Then, slowly, a little girl ran up to him with a wide smile and jumped into his lap. It was his goddaughter, his sister's daughter, who was coming right behind him in a stroller with a brown-haired woman beside her, the new person walking with him, who respected his history, who offered silence and presence. Emily watched everything. Her hands began to tremble. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Only then did she understand. There was no turning back. And it was in that instant that she saw. That she realized what she had lost. Not just a good man, but the home they had built, the respect that sustained their love. She saw that the kiss she gave hadn't just taken away someone's trust. It had taken away her very future. What she had for seconds, cost her a lifetime. And he, now, smiled again. But it wasn't for her. It never would be again. Emily didn't go home that day at the park. Not because I didn't want her to, but because there was no home left to go back to. The home she knew was now just a memory. She walked through streets she no longer recognized, where the faces seemed strange, and the sounds of the city bothered her like never before. She felt small, empty, an invisible presence in the real world. She slept silently that night, listening to her own breathing, searching in the spaces between the lines of sleep for some form of forgiveness that was deeper than what she had received. Ethan had been clear. He no longer held grudges, but that didn't mean there was still room for her. His forgiveness was liberating, but it wasn't an invitation back. It was a final point. In the months that followed, she tried to rebuild her life. She moved apartments, left the neighborhood where they lived together, sold the car they had bought together. She left behind all the objects that held memories, the cups he used for coffee, the books they read together on rainy afternoons, the pictures from their travels, the notes forgotten in drawers. Trying to forget became a necessity. But forgetting, for her, was like trying to erase a tattoo with tears. Nothing disappeared. Everything came back. Sometimes in a song playing at the market, sometimes in the smell of perfume on the subway, sometimes in a joke made by someone who didn't even know she existed. Emily missed him in a way she couldn't explain to anyone. It was more than just longing. It was physical absence. It was the echo of a love she herself had destroyed. What hurt the most, however, wasn't losing Ethan. It was knowing that he remained the same person, honest, loving, loyal. And that she would never have another chance with someone like him. She discovered this little by little, in fleeting encounters, in silences that no new face could fill. She tried to connect, but the comparison was inevitable. No hug felt the same. No look gave her the security he did. No conversation went as deep. And then she understood, some people are irreplaceable. They are unique. And when you lose something like that because of ego, vanity, or impulse, the emptiness that remains is eternal. While she grappled with her own ruin, Ethan walked new paths. Not in haste, but with determination. He didn't throw himself into a new love to forget. He gave himself time. He healed his own wounds with patience. He went to therapy, wrote long texts he never published, read books about new beginnings, cried alone, laughed little by little, discovered new tastes, revisited places alone, and above all, reconnected with himself. Life, in time, reorganized itself around other priorities. He met someone special unexpectedly, not in a movie romance, but in a simple encounter, in a sincere conversation, without games, without haste, without fear. It was different, more mature, more genuine. This new woman didn't come to heal him, he had already healed. She came to walk beside him, not to fill gaps. And that made all the difference. Today, Ethan is a man at peace. He no longer carries the pain of betrayal as an open wound, but as a scar that reminds him where not to tread again. His current love is serene, built on respect, honesty, and reciprocity. He has nights of laughter, mornings of comfortable silence, and days of lightness. He has never again heard anyone say, "Can I kiss you just for fun?" Because now he is with someone who understands that love is not measured in permissions, but in daily choices. His new partner didn't need to compete with the past. She simply built the present alongside him, calmly and truthfully. Emily, for her part, became discreet. She stopped posting photos, going to parties, trying to appear happy. She abandoned the need to prove anything to others. She lives a quieter, more introspective life. Deep down, she still hopes that one day she will be able to forgive herself. Because she knows that she didn't just lose Ethan. She lost the best version of herself that existed when she was by his side. The woman who laughed sincerely, who loved without guilt, who was better because she felt truly loved. That version of her died. And nothing, and no one, has been able to bring her back to life. Years later, at an event for Ethan's sister, they met again by chance. He was with his wife, smiling with their young son in his arms. Emily watched him from afar, with a sad smile and teary eyes. She didn't approach. She just observed. And, seeing him so fulfilled, she understood that her story with him was, in fact, over. That fate hadn't made a mistake. It had only given her a choice. And she had chosen wrong. This story ends with each of them going their own way. Ethan, stronger, more aware, lighter. Emily, more alone, more reflective, more regretful. Not as punishment, but as a consequence. Because life demands its due. And sometimes, it demands a high price. When you play with true love, you don't just lose the person. You lose your own balance. You lose who you are. And there isn't always time to go back. There isn't always a second chance. And the silence of someone who once loved you with everything they had, hurts more than any scream. If you've made it this far, comment and tell us what you thought of this story. What would you have done in his place? And in her place? Your opinion is extremely important to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more stories like this, with real, intense, and emotional scripts. This story leaves you with a profound reflection. Betrayal is not just a breach of contract between two people. It is a slow and silent destruction of everything built with love. It is the end of a story that could have been beautiful. It is the cutting of a root that could have borne fruit. To betray is not just to make a mistake. It is to hurt someone who trusted you. And trust, once lost, cannot be recovered with tears, pleas, or promises. It is lost forever. Remember, here on the channel, we do not support any kind of betrayal. That we tell these fictional stories so you can clearly see how far a mistake can go. Until the next story.